29. Actually, I lied, which I shouldn't do as a pastor. That number is a 7. 27. I thought it was. I was already open to the correct place, but then I second-guessed myself because I can't read my own handwriting. It's bad. But anyway, as we come into this, I want to remind you where we were last week. I entitled last week's message when I put online was Family Feud. I hope it was useful to you as we looked between Jacob and Esau and their parents and Isaac and Rebekah and all that happened within that dynamic, saying, listen, God has a plan for all the craziness that you might call family, or all the craziness that you might have endured because of others and things. He has a plan, he has a purpose. And ultimately my goal was to show you that even though Jacob had been deemed as blessed in the story, he ultimately is the one who lives most entrapped, it looks like, in his life, and never seems to quite be able to be at peace about who he is and who God created him to be. And then his brother, who's his twin brother, Esau, who, when his father comes to give him a blessing, really just says basically the opposite of what he gave Jacob. So it's more of a curse in the sense that you're not going to be able to do this, you're not going to have this, you're not going to have that. But he says one thing, he says, but when you grow restless, this is verse 40, when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke, that's Jacob's yoke, off from your neck. He says you're going to serve him, but when you grow restless, you'll be able to throw that off your neck. And ultimately, 21 years later, when they come back together, we see that Jacob is still struggling for a blessing. He's fighting with God and angels saying, I won't let go of you unless you bless me. And he's still trying to earn his brother's favor by sending gifts and sending entourage in front of him, that his brother doesn't kill him for what he stole from him, which was his birthright. He didn't steal his birthright, actually, he gave away his birthright. He stole his blessing. And Esau, we ultimately find out, says, why are you doing all this? I don't need all your stuff. Now, what's interesting to me, because I wanted to kind of revisit this, because we didn't talk about it last week, do you notice that Jacob never even says he's wrong? Jacob just wants to come home. Jacob never even says, Esau, will you forgive me for what I've done? He doesn't say that. Esau has already shaken off that yoke of anything Jacob could have still held on to him with the power. He has removed it, he has left it, and he has moved on. And so when he comes to him and they're trying to reconcile, he says, why all this fanfare? He said, well, I was trying to buy your favor, basically. He goes, I don't need your stuff. I'm good. God's taken care of me. God's provided for me. I'm good. Welcome home. And it's such a stark contrast from what you expect when you see the beginning of the story and the end of the story. And my real question was, can you shake off the yoke that others have put on you to be able to live at peace, saying, you know what? I'm good. I'm good. I don't need you. I don't need your approval. I don't need you to even come try and make this right. I have shaken that off, and I have thrown it off in such a way, I don't need anything from you. I'm good. And I really mean it. I'm good. I'm not saying, oh, no, I'm good. And what's so interesting is as they come together in that land, ultimately it's Esau that has to move at the end because the land can't support them both. They both have so much and such great blessing. The land can't support them, and ultimately Esau actually moves away. And Jacob moves back in. But anyway, in all that, I want us to look at that question of, can you throw off the yoke that someone else has put on your neck? Or someone else has tried to bind you, or someone else has tried to enslave you, or someone else has maybe just done you absolutely wrong. They did. But you're not going to live as a victim. You're going to be victorious through Christ because you're above and beyond what somebody has done to you. That's really kind of the question we're going to be looking at. But I need to clarify one thing in my tiredness last week and rolling in. I quoted like 20,000 sheep, and I told you I wasn't sure. That seemed like way too many. Sure enough, that's way too many. And if you read it, it's like a tenth of that. But he still sends goats, sheep, camel, blah, blah, blah. Just wanted to clarify. I did read it. I just didn't remember it correctly. And I'm not making this stuff up. And when I do miss things, I want to clarify that. Don't go off and tell somebody else, man, Jacob gave 20,000 sheep to his brother Esau. But anyway, with that in mind, let me do it this way. Start in verse 38. Esau said to his father, "Do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too." You can feel his desperation. Then Esau wept aloud. As he recognized, his father said, I don't have one for you, but here's what I can tell you. Your dwelling will be away from the earth's riches. His brother's dwelling was going to be in the earth's riches. Away from the dew of heaven above. His brothers was going to be with the dew. And you're going to live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. Now again, I think it's interesting that we talked about last week when Jacob comes up to Esau, and everything he says, literally every time, he says, "My Lord, your servant." And Jacob has put himself in a position as a servant, not Esau, and demanding that Esau be in that role. But here's the beauty of this, and the question is, what will you listen to in life when God speaks or your father speaks or authority speaks? Because so many of us will just go, well, there it is. I'm never going to have anything. I'm never going to have enough. It's always going to be a year of drought. Everybody's going to be against me. I'm always going to have to be fighting. I'm going to be given the sword, and that's what I got. Or is it the last sentence? I want to do an entire sermon series on this, and I still may. That word "but" is incredibly important. And there's a series I want to look through of going, when it says, but God did. This was happening, but God did this. You saw this, but God did that. Because when you put that conjunction in there, what it does is it basically says everything I've said up to this point really doesn't matter. Because here's what's important for you to know. But we don't see that in our lives. We'll just listen to it all, or we'll just stick over here and, yeah, well, you said this, and we ignore everything after it. Understand, he said all that. But there's a conjunction that says, but, which means this really isn't going to be that big a deal. What I need you to know is when you grow restless. And again, I said last week, I don't know what that word restless looked like. We don't know. Scripture doesn't tell us how Esau wrestled with this, or how he grew restless, or how he just went, I'm done. It's over. I've lived this too long. But I bet you can figure for yourself what that looks like. When you go, listen, I'm just tired. I told a guy one time in a church, and probably not something a pastor should say, but we had been at odds for a while. And the sad thing is I knew when he came back to the church, I was actually supposed to beg him to come back. This is a weird spiritual moment, just to tell you that everything God asks you to do is not going to be pleasant. But I knew in my soul I was supposed to ask him and his family to come back. He'd been our worship leader prior, and then he left, and there were some issues. And I knew when I asked him, division and dissension were coming with him. But I knew I was supposed to ask him anyway. And even beg him, even when he goes, no, oh, come on, you're really supposed to be here. I don't know how God would bring division and dissension into church and to be a positive thing. But ultimately, I still don't, because it came with it. And there was a point about a year and a half or 2 years later that I sat in my office and I said, I refuse to fight with you anymore. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I refuse. I don't care about you enough to fight with you anymore. Now, that's not something a pastor's supposed to say or even a person's supposed to say. But I finally resolved in my life, he had sucked so much energy and so much time and so much effort. I was going to throw him off in a way and say, listen, I don't care what you do anymore. It just doesn't matter because I just don't care enough. Sometimes you got to get to that point where you go, I just got to let it go. And I don't want you to stay there because bitterness grows out of that. But I remember when I went home after that, literally there's a moment in my Jeep that a song came on, and I love a Jeep because there's no top, that I was driving with my knee and my hands just out the top, just praising God finally. It's over. Whatever it was supposed to accomplish in his life, accomplish in my life, or accomplish in the church's life, doesn't really matter anymore because I've released it to you. It's up to you what you do with it now. I'm not trying to control it anymore. And that restlessness, that literally I could see myself as an individual just going, man, I'm braced every time you come around. I'm ready for the fight. That's when I refuse. I just refuse to fight anymore. I'm done with it. I shook it off. I didn't let it control me or my time anymore. With that in mind, I don't know what that looks like for you, but you can probably name it for yourself. Whatever that is, that moment that you need to be able to say, I'm past that, I'm beyond it. But I want to give you an opportunity today to maybe understand it better if we can. Okay? So we don't use the word yoke much anymore in this world, unless you're talking about an egg and you want one or you want it hardened or whatever. A yoke, I don't have a yoke. because I'm not a rancher or a farmer who needs oxen or cattle or whatever, but I do have this thing that I bought about a month ago. This thing is fantastic. I am not putting out a commercial for them. I won't even tell you their name. But I have neck issues, and partly probably because I had a tree fall on me 4 years ago. And it's just never been quite right since then. Even though I went to the chiropractor, it just kind of jammed everything. So it makes my neck really sore, which then in turn makes my shoulder really sore, which then sometimes even makes my arm really sore. Just depending on what's happening. I feel it right here. I feel it down the middle of my back, and sometimes the whole thing just hurts. And I finally went, you know what, I'm sick of it. I'm going to do something about it. And I could get a brace that you hooked on your door, and then you got to sit on the floor by the door and try and put yourself in traction. It looked really silly. Okay, by the way, so does this one here in a minute. But anyway, but it was also expensive. So then I found this cheap little one. And what you do is you take this nice little yoke. That's what it is. This is what a yoke would be on an oxen. You strap it in. They're supposed to be made and fit to that oxen so that they're comfortable, so they don't chafe, so they don't wear, so they don't resist them. But the purpose of a yoke is this. It is to guide, control, or make something into servitude. Now that's not what this yoke does, but that's the purpose of a yoke. So if you think about it in the story of Esau, he was saying, listen, Esau is going to try and control you. He's going to put you in a servitude role, and you could take that if you want to, and you could live that if you want to, but you don't have to. You can shake it off. You can either let that yoke guide you, or you can let me guide you and something else guide you beyond that. But in this case, this yoke, I get restless from it sometimes. But what happens is, it's got a little pump. Pump it up, kind of like you used to pump up your sneakers in the old day, right? You pump it up. Now, it has this fantastic point, and this is what I want to get to, is right about there. I always shut it down. I sit there for a minute. I do this at night, by the way, while watching TV and eating popsicles. Just to give you a full picture. I let it sit there for a second, and then I always go, wait, 1, 2, 3. Ah, there it is. And that fifth little pump. Now, here's the weird thing. Do I look silly? I feel really comfortable. Now, what's strange about it is before this, it's very uncomfortable, okay? If I pump it up to that first level, it's better, but still not very comfortable. And it's really weird because it's happening right this moment. If I pump it up to that other level with 5 more pumps, it hits this thing where my whole body just relaxes. And it literally feels like I'm going to fall asleep. And it's not due to lack of oxygen. It's due to all that pressure is relieved. And all of a sudden I just go, oh, I could just sit here for a long time. And the popsicle melts and the TV goes on and I just rest. Now I still got a yoke on me, but I'm resting. And it was something that was uncomfortable. Now here's the weird thing that I want you to see. But if I pump it up a few more times, all of a sudden it's not really very comfortable at all anymore, and it'll kind of choke you to death, okay? But I have this great little, so please give me the valve. There it is. Whoo, great little valve. Let's see her back out of it, because it's kind of choking. Now here's the deal that I want you to see is a yoke can be 2 different things. A yoke can be something that constricts and literally sucks the life out of me till I can't breathe. Or it can be something that when placed in the right position, under the right care, because it still is there to guide, control, and to possibly even put you in servitude. That's why it exists on an oxen, is so the oxen will plow where the farmer wants them to plow. But the correct yoke is made for that specific ox and is tailor-made for him so it is never chafing, never roughing, and never rough and never uncomfortable. And even though he's plowing, it's not uncomfortable. Does that make sense? So it can be the same thing but function in 2 different ways. Here's the picture I want you to see as we look through this. And yes, I'm going to leave this on for a minute. Y'all can handle that, right? I need you to remember this, okay? I climbed a ladder one time in a sermon and sat at the top of the ladder and preached the entire sermon from the top of the ladder. They remembered it. So anyway, here we go. It's not going to be there all day. But Esau's yoke was something that he could have been embittered by or even just squelched by that he never accomplished anything and he could have just fallen under the weight of it. But he became restless, okay? I'm going to tell you if I can. Let me try it this way. I think restless and weary are very similar at their root, but different in the end of it. And I'll tell you why. Restless is this. I'm tired of the situation or circumstance, so therefore I'm restless. And I'll get there where I get tired of something, and all of a sudden I'll do what I normally wouldn't do because I'm just sick of the circumstance situation. I want out. So there's a restlessness in me that leads me to act in a way I normally wouldn't act, hopefully to get out of that circumstance or situation, because now I am so uncomfortable under it. Put on a wool shirt or something, a wool sweater on me, and I have a issue with wool. I'm going to get out of it, okay, fairly quickly because it's just uncomfortable. You have your things in life that are that way. But it also, it's not just because of I'm tired of it, or just because I'm uncomfortable in it. It's because I don't wish to be bound anymore by it. I want to be done with it. I just want to be, I want it behind me. I want it not to be something that impacts me anymore. So therefore, a restlessness gets me away. A restlessness will move me away from that. Well, weariness is similar but different. And I'm getting somewhere, I promise you here in a minute. And you can turn over your Bibles if you want to Matthew 11, because that's where we're going next. But weariness is the same in the sense that I'm tired, focus more on tired, of the situation and circumstance I'm in. So I'm weary. Not restless, I'm weary. There's a heaviness. I can't move. I don't have the energy. I'm still uncomfortable, but I'm too tired to do anything about it. And here's the difference. Restless, I don't want to be bound. Weary, I don't want to be in charge anymore. I just want somebody to take this off of me. I don't want to be responsible. Can you please remove this from me? I'm weary. But it has the same result in the sense, for most of us, that we want to have it removed. Can I challenge you that a yoke can be good or bad? And it may not just be something you need to throw off, because really that's kind of where my message wanted to go was, let's just throw this off. Let's just throw this off. Because in Matthew chapter 11, if you go there, there's a scripture where Jesus says, I need you to put this on. You go, but wait, I just threw it off. Yeah, but I need you to put this on. Well, wait, I just got rid of that. Yeah, that's because you don't need to be in charge. I do. And when you're in charge, you will get restless or weary. But with me in charge, you will find something different. And he says in Matthew 11:25, at that time Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this was your good pleasure. All things have been committed to me by my Father. Jesus is speaking. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son. And those whom he chooses, whom the Son chooses to reveal him. In other words, he can't be known. And he says this, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened or heavy laden, and I will give you rest. He says, instead of throwing off your brother's yoke, take on my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle, humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So whether you're weary or restless, I'm going to encourage you, if man has put a yoke on you, feel free to throw it off. But understand there is still to be a yoke on you. And it's the one that Christ places that he says, if you will, put this on. Especially if you're weary and you're tired of doing this on your own. Put my yoke on you. It's easy. How many of you feel like Jesus gives you rest? Okay? All the time or sometimes when you're desperate. Let me put it another way. How many of you picture him as gentle and that his load or his request or his burden is light? Because I think a lot of us in the church, there may be some of us who raise our hands, but I think a lot of us in the church would go, no, the Jesus I've been presented and the yoke I've been given is I'm a slave and a servant, and that's all I am, and I probably don't matter. He loves me, but ultimately if I don't do what he asked me to do, it's not going to go so well. And man, what he asked me to do is exhausting, and it seems like it's beyond my capability, and I can never really accomplish it, and I never really feel worthy. And so his yoke on me, or this yoke that's been placed on me, feels like anything but rest. Now again, I need you to clarify in this scripture, he doesn't say rest for your bodies. He may lead your body to be absolutely weary and exhausted. He may even lead it to the end of itself in death. But what he's saying is, I can give rest for your soul. That innermost part of who you are. I'm not really trying to give rest for your body. I'm trying to give rest for your soul. And if your soul can take my yoke upon you, my burden is easy and light. Here's the reason I present that this way. If Jesus' yoke on you is anything but easy and light and restful, it may be because you have man's yoke on you of Jesus. You let that simmer for a minute. It may be because you have seen Jesus' yoke through the eyes of men where they have said you should and you ought to and you have to and blah, blah, blah. And they have used Jesus as a foundation on which to stand. But the yoke is not his. It's theirs. And oftentimes it can be a family member. Oftentimes it can be a well-meaning pastor. Oftentimes it can just be the church and religion in general that says you should, you oughta. And every time they say you should and you oughta, and it becomes constricting, and anything beyond life and health and happiness, that is a yoke you should shake off. Because it's not his. Here's the thing, that even if this thing is perfectly set, if I leave it too long, it's damaging. Because my neck is intended to have support from other places. But if I put it on too much, or I let somebody else be in charge, they don't know what's right. Only I can say, oh, that's the spot. And I can tell you exactly where I just go, oh. Should, oughta, you're not worthy, you're not good enough, shame, guilt. None of those are his yoke. They can be his yoke through the eyes of men who still filter it through, sorry, I'm getting lightheaded, give me a second. Whew, see what I do for you people? Here we go, let's take it off. It can be man's yoke filtered through their own insecurities, their own desires, their own motives, or their own unworthiness. But I will tell you, if man is putting it on you as you should or you ought to, be restless under that. Do you ever feel it? I know I do as a pastor. Man, I sniff it out. Even in my own family, when my own family says I should or ought to, I will run from it. I will resist it. I will shake it off. I will throw it off. You tell me I should or ought to,